You can understand it if you scrutinize the American archives. That is what was said in a certain video.
すごいでしょ。不敬の天皇陛下をもうとにかくやめろ。今すぐ母系に帰ろう。
すごいですね、本当に。
でこれからもずっと続くので、だから例えば不敬一系で神武天皇につながっておられて、今いわゆる旧宮家にいらっしゃる方で法律の趣旨を実行しようと考える方がいらしても、どんだけのオールドメディアからの、女性週刊誌なんかもすごいですよね。女性週刊誌は僕に対する名誉毀損事件まで本当はあります。でそれは後で紹介する新しい本に書いてますけど、いずれにしてもここまで母系天皇に帰ろうっていうのかなというのを感じてる時にね、このサムネイルで言ってる通りね、 GHQ の亡霊っていうものをすごくリアルに、僕らもちろん生まれてませんけども、この部屋にいるあれ見てらっしゃる方も大半まだ生まれてない時代に、本当はアメリカ軍が中心の占領軍のこれ長く言うと占領軍総司令官の司令部なんですでそれを英文にした時の略語で GHQ って言ってるんですけど、この簡単に言うと要するに占領軍司令部ですね。そこが何のために法的根拠もなく11あった宮家をその時点では廃絶したのかそのことをですね、今すごくシンプルに考えれば理由はたった一つなんですよね。将来天皇陛下がいらっしゃらなくなるように。でその天皇陛下というのは別に母系だったらいてもいいんですよ。なぜかというと世界に王室があれこれあってで全部母系ですけど、アメリカはいわばイギリスの国王あるいは女王陛下を否定して作った国ですけど、それだけにすごくアメリカ社会に憧れがあるんですけれども、日本だけこれアメリカっていう国、特に占領軍の残した記録を精査していくとパッと理解する力はすごくありますね。それはむしろ伝統がない若い未熟な国だから子供が物事を吸収するみたいに吸収してて、日本の天皇陛下だけ例外で父方でつながってるから一番最初の根幹の神武天皇が実在かどうかはこの際はほとんど関係がなくて神武天皇は実在してないとは言い切れません。つまり統制神武統制の証拠と思われるものが残ってるんで、たった一人に修練できるかどうかは分かりませんが、いずれにしろオリジンがあって、しかもそのオリジンの神武天皇が生まれた年を最初にするんじゃなくて即位なさったことを始まりにしてるっていうのは独裁地を作らないって意図ですよね。それをアメリカが見抜いた気配があって、この先つまり日本が戦争に負けて打ちひしがれている時に東京裁判で例えば死刑にしろって意見の国もあった。それから廃位、五条位とか大位じゃなくて廃位、つまりナポレオンが廃帝となったように天皇陛下のご存知をなくしてしまいって主張した国もあったけど、合衆国特にマッカーサー元帥はそうしなかった。なぜかというとここで天皇陛下のご存在をなくしてしまえば誰が見てもアメリカがやったことなので、下手をすると北方領土、今でいう北方領土、つまり北の果てから沖縄に至るまで反乱が起きると。でその時に米軍はとても抑え込む力がない。なんとなればペリー提督が19世紀に体験したように、日本はもともと隅々まで武士がいた国だからその伝統もあるので、それを避けるためにとりあえず当面は天皇陛下のご存在を揺るがせにしないと。ただし時限爆弾、仕掛けをしとく。それは簡単で後継者がいないようにするためです。その後継者は母系の後継者なら問題ない。しかし父系でつながっている後継者をそれをなくしてしまえば、やがて現在の父系一系で世界で唯一つながっている天皇陛下のご存在はなくなると。今丁寧に解説しましたけど、宮家の廃絶って要はそういうことなんですよね。でそれも法的根拠がないものだからいきなりダメと言えずに、 どうやって排除したかというと、皇室経済法というものによって、要するにもう普通にサラリーマンになって働かないと家族を養えない状況に追い込んで廃絶に行ったわけですよね。それを考えたらですね、今回母系に帰ろうっていうのは要は GHQ の指令そのままじゃないですか。だからこれなんですよね。
81歳の子供。
はい。
After the war, 11 princely houses left the imperial family. It was a time bomb, he says, planted by the occupation to end the male line of succession. So I did as I was told. I read the documents. Let me give the conclusion first. The involvement of the occupation is real, the records confirm it, but the documents never proved its purpose. The claim breaks into 4 propositions. The first 2 are facts, that the occupation dismantled the house's finances and that the houses then left. The last 2 are intent, that its aim was to end the male line, and so today's crisis is its time bomb. Facts can be checked against the record. Intent cannot, not without a document in which they wrote the aim down. Keeping these apart is the whole task. First, the case for the accusation. In a confidential report to Washington, MacArthur wrote that the members of all 11 families would shortly become commoners and that the property tax would cut their assets by 40 to 50%. The occupation's hand is unmistakable. This much is real. And the American policy paper, drawn up in early 1946, states plainly, retaining the emperor system in its present form is not considered consistent with our aims. So the idea that the occupation was gentle toward the throne, that too is not accurate. But the same paper continues. It urges the Japanese either to abolish the institution or to reform it, and says the question must be left to the Japanese to decide for themselves. This is not a secret plan to destroy the throne. On the contrary, it warns that anything imposed would be rejected. And here is the decisive page, the founding directive behind every draft, written by the Supreme Commander himself. Point 1. The emperor is head of state. His succession is dynastic. Point 3. The feudal peerage ends, except that of the imperial family. While abolishing all hereditary privilege, he carved out the imperial house by name. If ending the male line were the goal, why write these 2 sentences yourself? In the American documents examined, no statement of purpose to reduce the heirs to sever the male line was found. This does not prove none exists anywhere, but in the open primary sources, the document of intent is simply not there, and the burden of proof lies with the one who claims. Still, a force that wanted the throne gone did exist. Not the occupation headquarters, but the body above it, the Far Eastern Commission of 11 nations. Within it, the Soviet Union and Australia demanded the emperor be tried, and the institution abolished. And MacArthur suppressed the publication of their principles, judging it would look like Allied coercion. So there was an enemy, but it was not the occupation command. MacArthur, if anything, stood between it and the throne. Then was the occupation indifferent to the houses? No, it pointed early to which would remain. In the diary of a court attendant, on New Year's Day 1946, the education chief, Dyke, is recorded as confirming the standing of the emperor and his 3 brothers as members of the imperial family. So the occupation did reach into the question of which houses stay. On that point, the video is right. This cuts both ways. What was confirmed was the emperor and his brothers, the core of the house. To confirm the core is the opposite of wishing the line extinct. Dyke led information and education, not the central government section. This was an opinion in a diary, not a written order. Yet its direction, keep the core and shrink the size, matches the American policy exactly, not extinction, reduction. Now trace what actually thinned the succession, and much of it predates the occupation. The Meiji Imperial House Law of 1889 forbade adoption and removed princesses from the family upon marriage to a commoner. Both were Japanese rules, set 56 years before the Americans arrived. And in 1920, through the Imperial Family Council and the Privy Council, Japan set an internal rule to reduce the Fushimi line, the common ancestor of all 11 houses. But it was an unpublished internal rule, not self-executing, a direction, not a decree. And one is tempted to say Japan itself set the time bomb. But hold, the rule was unpublished, never automatically applied. Its 12 cases were all by personal petition, and it was abolished in 1946. The intent to shrink was real, but that the houses would have vanished on their own cannot be asserted. There is as little proof of a Japanese time bomb as of an American one. Consider the consorts. Once, a son by a secondary consort could inherit if no legitimate heir remained. The mother of the Taisho emperor was such a consort to the Meiji emperor. The very passage from Meiji to Taisho was carried by that system. In the video, he says, concubine is a commoner's word. The imperial house had its own ranks of consorts. This is correct, in both the term and the substance. As a rebuttal to the claim that without consorts there could be no unbroken line, it stands. To laugh at him here would be our error, not his. And he says more. The consort system ended with the Showa emperor 23 years before the defeat. This is true. 1945 minus 23 is 1922. The single greatest support of male line succession was removed a quarter century before the occupation by Japan's own hand. His correctness undermines his own thesis. December 1945. Prince Nashimoto, alone among the imperial family, is arrested as a war crimes suspect. The court is shaken. The Vice Minister, Kato, pushed the departures forward to protect the core of the house. The removal of the 11 was, most likely, neither pure coercion nor pure choice, but a defensive triage, cutting the branches to save the trunk. The 1947 procedure survives in the Diet records. Laid out in order, it is no simple cause and effect. The first wish to leave came from the princes themselves, but it spread to all 11 houses only after the occupation cut the money. The two are intertwined. Japan's own record frames it thus. With the stipends cut and the property tax taking some 89%, the foreign ministry wrote that the one way to save the houses from collapsing together was dissent from the imperial family. Under pressure from above, the Japanese side carried out the steps below. That double character is the true shape in the sources. Neither the occupation forced it, nor Japan chose it freely, fits the timeline alone. A wish held by a few was pushed across all of them by the occupation's financial hand. They say post-war democracy imported the idea of a female line. The text says the reverse. The old constitution wrote male descendants. The new one deleted the phrase. The constitution does not forbid a female sovereign. The occupation's own draft said only dynastic, specifying no sex. What forbids it is the lower law, the imperial house law, written by Japan. In the Diet, Minister Kanamori conceded the matter of sex was now left freely to ordinary law. The constitution opened the door. What closed it was a Japanese law. In 1946, with the constitutional bar gone, Japan chose male line succession again, deliberately. Here is the article that bites hardest today. One who has left the imperial family and their descendants can never become imperial again, save a woman who becomes empress, or one who marries an imperial male. That a departed member can never return matters more than the departure itself. It is why the 2026 reform had to use adoption as a side door, not a return. And this article sits in a Japanese law. What changed between Meiji and the post-war, newly narrowed, were only three things: sons of consorts excluded, the return sealed by Article 15, the 11 houses gone. Male line only, the adoption ban, the marriage departure, all continue from Meiji. The post-war destroyed everything is an overstatement, and the table shows it. Now the statements one by one. First, what he got right, for to list only faults is not verification. Nations that demanded abolition at the tribunal, that MacArthur did not. The marriage rule as Meiji Article 44, the consort system ending before the war, the numbers, the caution about the first emperor's historicity, all accurate. 9 statements sound. His history is not crude. On the Far Eastern Commission, it was he who pointed first. This inquiry only confirmed him later. And the errors, and there are 3, that the houses were removed without legal basis. No, a Japanese council did it under the law, that the household economy law drove them to poverty, the wrong law, and the pressure came earlier. That one must cross to Washington to know. No, the records are in Tokyo. And the core claim, the time bomb, is not an error but something else. He says the purpose is unwritten, to be deduced. But a purpose placed beyond all documents can absorb any evidence. It cannot be refuted. And against that deduction stands the Supreme Commander's own line. His succession is dynastic. In sum, 9 sound, 3 wrong, 2 matters of deduction, 1 of interpretation, 4 beyond checking. Most of his facts hold. The trouble lies 1 layer up. 1. The leap from fact to intent. 2. No awareness that his own accurate facts undo his thesis. 3. He fails to use the very document that would most help him, the occupation directive that is the strongest evidence for his own case. Oh, where are these documents? The originals sit in the American archives, in Record Group 331. But Japan's National Diet Library filmed and holds a complete copy, in Tokyo, collected, in its own words, without selection, all of it. The government section alone runs to 4,700 documents. No crossing is required. And the man who says go is himself a member of parliament, the person in this country with the easiest access of all to that library. And in America you can see it all digitized. The truth is the reverse. The National Archives hold some 13 billion pages. About 2% are digitized, even after the 2026 goal, under 4%. The other 96 are only on site. Without first naming the document, one is lost even standing in the building. Not online does not mean hidden. There are 3 tiers, open on the internet, viewable at partner libraries, and viewable only inside the Diet Library. The occupation papers span all 3. Not all are on the web, but all can be read if one goes. The barrier is not distance. It is labor. No full-text search, only reels and folders. Read one image at a time. And the traffic runs both ways. Some 73,000 Japanese publications, gathered under wartime censorship, crossed to America to the Prange collection at the University of Maryland. Records have traveled the Pacific in both directions. Only in America, only in Japan, each is half true. So the barrier is not distance. If examine, and you will know is the claim, what is needed is not a flight, but one document number. And that document, if it exists, can be read in Tokyo. Conclusion in 3. 1. The occupation did dismantle the house's foundation and drive them out, and pointed early to the 3 that would stay. The involvement is real. 2. Yet the fragile structure of succession is not its work alone. Male line only, the adoption ban, the marriage departure are Meiji's. The consort system ended in 1922, and post-war Japan chose the male line again, excluded the consort-born, sealed the return, and carried out the removal through its own council. 3. What the occupation confirmed was the core of the house, the opposite of wishing the line extinct. So the claim that it planted a time bomb to end the male line is in the open primary sources, unproven. What can be shown is an overlap, the occupation's strong hand, and Japan's own long choices meeting. I was told to look, so I looked. The occupation's hand I found, but the documents were in Tokyo, and the purpose was not written there. What was written instead was a single line. His succession is dynastic.